In this episode we tackle applying static grass, we look at using rubberized horsehair for hedges and embankments, and the sticky subject of ballasting double slips. Hi, welcome back to Chadwick Model Railway. I'm Charlie, and we'll first kick off really about the results of the Key Model World Hornby Magazine Awards ceremony. Well, I was fortunate enough to win both of the YouTubers categories, and I find it truly humbling, especially when you consider the other people who were shortlisted. There were some phenomenal names there. But as usual, hopefully it's not all about me, and I must also congratulate Eric French. You may know him from his YouTube side of Underground Eric, because his layout Harefield Road won Best in Show, and considering the other wonderful layouts that were at the Great Electric Train Show, it was incredible. And also I'd like to thank the Hornby Magazine team who put the show together to make it the great success that it was. Marvellous. Right, what's this video about? Now, you may recall in a previous video that I installed this bit of sort of vegetation along here, and it's all full of sort of woodland scenics type clumpy vegetation. But I was never really happy with it, because what I think I've created is something out of Kew Gardens rather than a piece of sort of neglected countryside. And then when we moved down to the other side, the embankment, I didn't do that at all, because I was unsure if what I'd done looked okay, because what I couldn't do then is have that one looking totally different. Now, as you're aware, I was at the Great Electric Train Show last weekend, and if you want inspiration, then you go and see quality layouts there. And I spoke with both Dan Everson and Underground Eric, I'm sure you know these characters, on the layouts that they had at the show, and they were absolutely stunning. And as you can see here with Dan's O-gauge layout, it really is a neglected piece of countryside with a high embankment, and it's so steep, obviously cattle and other sort of livestock can't graze on it, so it becomes overgrown and sort of almost out of control, really. Marvellous. Whereas Underground Eric's layout is totally different. It's not manicured, it's just not left to go quite as wild because it's adjacent to a railway. And then drawing from these two characters, I thought I would have a go at this area here, and I've never been one for using static grass away from the edge of the layout. This kind of distance here, yeah, I get that for static grass because you can see it, the blades as it were, but normally at the back of the layout I would just use sort of flock substances. Anyway, as you can see looking down here, it's all sort of woodland scenic sort of blended turf sort of scatter, and there's some staining on it now from when I did the ballasting. Anyway, we'll lose all that. So what I'm going to do is mix up a blend of 2mm static grass, and using my knock spreader we'll put it on. Now, if you've never used static grass, it can be a sort of step in the dark, and I found that when I first started. So what I did was I got a small piece of timber and I painted on some sort of neat sort of PVA, and I put different blends of static grass on there to see what effect they gave and see what would fit in with the hillsides that I'd actually done in static grass. So that's how I got the sort of flavour for what I want. And if you want to blend, just practice on a gash piece of plywood and see to get the effect you're after. Anyway, so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to paint sections of this and work my way down with neat PVA, and then get in there with the static grass applicator. Now, I've masked off the back scene and also the platform area and the track, because at some stage I'm going to be spraying it with the old layering spray, and this is the stuff from Pico that I'm not recommending it. I'm sure there's loads of this around. This is PSG 11, and I'm not too sure I've actually got enough to do much beyond this kind of area here, so I might have to nip out a little later and buy some more. Now, I spoke to Dan Everson this morning about what to put on here first, because he uses the layering spray straight off, but not taking advice from people far more qualified than I am. What I'm going to do first, I'm going to paint it with neat PVA first to make sure that the first layer of static grass is good to go, because you know, this stuff has to be cleaned and you have to run a vacuum cleaner over it and that sort of thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint this whole area with PVA, and this is the cheap stuff from Wick, so it's, you know, no big shakes. And then I'm going to use 2mm static grass, and this is probably the spring grass from Pico or very similar. Anyway, so give me 5 minutes while I paint the whole of this area, and then we'll start putting it down. And obviously the static grass is only going to stick to where you put the glue. Quite obvious really, isn't it? So what applicator am I going to use? I've got a NOC Grassmaster 2.0 20 kilovolt. Lovely. It runs off a smoke alarm battery, simple 9-volt battery, and there's a lead to put in the, with a clip to put in the proximity of the area. It comes with 3 different fittings. This one here is for sort of 2 and 3mm grass. This one here, the medium one, is for called a 6mm, and this one's up at 10 to 12mm. Marvellous. Right, so all you do is get me a little hopper, which is, well, it's not actually a little hopper, it's quite a spacious hopper to be perfectly honest. Whap some of this in here. And I think using these sort of food containers is ideal, because then you can dump it straight back in of the stuff you haven't used. Now, I've no idea if this is going to be enough, so let me move the camera so you get a closer look. And I'll be perfectly honest with you, if it all goes to rats, that is of no consequence. I can always just rip it out and start again. Okay, turning on. And then with this in the area, it's just really a case of giving it a shake. And remembering this is really very much the sort of stage 1. Just the first layer is a basic coat of static grass, and from here on we then add various other colours and put sort of hopefully put some life in it. And here we are with our first layer. So I shall give that PVA a chance to dry while I just nip off for a cup of tea and a bun and come back in half an hour. Now next I'm going to add a bit of brown, and it happens to be from NOC, and it's just 2.5mm static grass, but I need to get it to stick, so I'm going to use the old Pico Scenic layering spray PSG 11. So I'm going to shake this up, spray it on the whole thing, and then put a little bit of this brown, not too much, just down, and see how that looks. Lovely, it's coming on, isn't it? And now I've switched to a sort of a beige grass, and this is again from NOC, it's 4mm, and this hopefully will give me a dead, dried out sort of grass look in certain areas. And I've had to switch the applicator to the medium sized one, which is 4 to 6mm. So we'll whap a bit of this down there and see how that looks. So in, of course, first with the old layering spray. Oh, I can't believe it, could you? Couldn't make it up. So Sorry about the interruption. That was Canon calling back to say they couldn't replicate the faults that I had with the camera. Fortunately, I'd used my phone to show them the faults before it went away, but they can't seem to find out what the issues are. Reassuring, isn't it? So what do we do now? Right, well, I've got some of this sort of packing material. It's like sort of rubberized coconut matting. I'm sure you've seen this stuff in packing cases, and they sell it at model railway shows for you to make your bushes out of. So I've pulled it apart and sort of teased it all out, and what I thought I would do, this would make a basis for bushes. So if I glue this into place, I can then add sort of ground cover to it to sort of leaf it up. But of course we need to hold it in place, so I thought I'd burn myself a few times and get out the hot glue gun. So let's get in close and we'll see how we get on and see how this stuff will glue on top of the static grass. So please remember, this is very much a test piece, so we'll just sort of whap some of this on there, and whilst I push it into place and get 3rd degree burns and go off to A&E. I can feel the warmth in my fingers coming through. But if we just hold it in place a little bit, there, oh, that seems to stick okay. That was a turn up for the books, wasn't it? And then once it's sorted, we can always trim off these odd flaky bits. Right, I'll do another piece here, and then we'll dress it up. It's just trying to get it into sort of ununiform sort of shapes, really, isn't it? Sort of. But maintaining the base colour of the static grass underneath. Ouch. And now it's just a case of trimming back some of the straggly bits which are a bit sort of over the top, you know, to keep it a little bit more realistic. So here's the current plan. I have scenic cement from Woodland Scenics as a glue. It's a spray-on adhesive. So what I thought of doing was spraying the scenic cement over this area of this rubberized matting, and then sprinkle it with something like green blended turf or earth blend, or other products from Woodland Scenic. So if I can sprinkle them on and give it that sort of realistic look, then that might be a way forward. If, of course, it doesn't look right, just rip it off and we'll go and try something else. But of course, because I'm spraying scenic cement around, I do need to keep all this stuff intact to stop all this glue and everything else going on the back scene and on the tracks for platform 3. Right, so let's give it a spray and see how we get on. It's just a case of sort of popping it on and see how it looks, really. And as long as we mix it up a bit, hopefully it'll look a little sort of more realistic. Now, I don't like to jump the gun, but I think I've cracked it, because over on these bushes here I've added a Woodland Scenics coarse turf, light green T63. £3.85 a bag, and by sprinkling that on top of this coconut matting kind of stuff, rubberized matting, it really does add to it and it does look right. So let me repeat what I've done down here so you can see a little better. So I've hot glued in a bit more of the rubberized matting in with my scenic spray. And then the coarse turf, sort of sprinkle it on. Hopefully you can see what I mean, and then push it in. And suddenly it looks much better. Yeah, it's starting to look like realistic bushes rather than a sort of a framework of matting that, you know. think we're getting there now. So what we need probably is another couple of colours just to blend it in. Now this is a stuff called Underbrush Olive Green FC134. So now we can see some different tones coming through. And I hope you'd agree that that's looking much better, much more sort of realistic. It's not going to come as a surprise, it's now the following day. But before we continue with the greenery, in the last video I mentioned that I would be ballasting from this area at the end of the east side of the station right around to the viaduct, and I will be ballasting it all, and it wouldn't necessarily make a good video, so I won't bother. A few people have said, can you just film the ballasting of the double slip? So yeah, fair enough, it's not going to take long. Right, now people worry about this, but at the end of the day we're just going to use 50-50 mix of PVA water with a dash of dish soap, as they call it in the States, a dash of washing up liquid. Water with a dash of washing up liquid, although you could use IPA, which will dry faster, but not everyone's got IPA, so I'm just going to do it the ordinary way with water. What else have I got? My ballast of choice, which is Woodland Scenics Fine Ballast Grey Blend. I'm not going to be using a dispenser because of the way that I'm close in there. A spoon, a pipette, a brush to brush the ballast away with, and some blue tack. Now, a double slip has 8 sets of blades, 4 on each end. So both of the point motors are in one position, so that the point is closed, so the other blades remain open. Now, between the open blades, what I do after I've put the ballast down is I put a drop of blue tack in there, so that when I glue it, the glue doesn't sort of stick those blades down. The glue will also hit the blades that are together, but don't worry about it, they'll all come free. This really isn't any big shakes. Now underneath that point I've got a green polythene sort of sheet, because I know that the PVA glue mix will drop straight through some areas of this point, because there are holes where the point motor comes up, where the cables go down, and hopefully I've bunged most of them up with blue tack, but we'll see where we are and how we get on. But do your ballasting of valuable components in the morning when you're fresh, and throughout the day then, as I have today, I can go over as the glue dries and give them a wiggle to make sure that they don't stick. But if they do stick, it's not the end of the world. Normally they will free, and if they won't free, just hit them with some hot water, because the hot water will dilute the PVA glue and they'll come free. So it really is no big shakes. You are not going to ruin your points. You just scare yourself to death that you will. Right, so it's now 10 to 10. So I'm going to put some ballast on this point, and then we'll come back with a camera and we'll glue it up, and I'll show you how I do it. Well, here we are more or less ready to go. Now, I forgot to mention, make sure of course you've got your infrastructure in first, that you've got your cable troughing, your point motors, all this sort of stuff is in before you start ballasting. But even more important than that, of course, that your point works perfectly, because ballasting isn't going to make it work any better. Now, I mentioned about the blades that are open and closed, so here hopefully you can see the blades that are open on this way. If I move it, perhaps you can see the blades move. No, you can't, can you? See if I can do it that way so you can see them move. I stuck my fingers in the ballast. Damn. If I poke that in the hole, you can see the blades move, and there's no grinding, there's no ballast stuck in those gaps. So I just stuck my fingers in it then. Marvellous, isn't it? Lovely. Oops, a little bit there. Right, so I said about putting a bit of blue tack in there, and all you're trying to do is stop glue from sticking to the faces of the point of the switch blades, of the switch rails. So by bunging a little bit of blue tack in there will help, like so. And it will just help to keep the point blades clean. Now there is no ballast within the other fine areas within the frogs and the blades around here, so that's all been cleared out. So hopefully now, if I can get that bit back in without disturbing everything else. Now let's whack another bit. Get in. Right, we're good to go. Right, so first we come in with the water. Practice there. Right, in with the water. Now it's going to move some of the ballast around. It's not the sort of thing you want to sort of get worried about. Lovely. And then we have our pipette with our ballast, and start off at the non-crucial areas. So we'll come down here. And people will say, yeah, avoid all the switch rails and all this blather. Well, clearly I don't bother. And I'm trying not to sound cavalier about it, but it's just not that important. Because I know these things will get a bit gummed up, but as the day goes on, because it's now only 25 past 10, it'll be fine. If they get stuck, they'll just free quite easy with a little bit of effort. It's no big shakes at all. And the way I use the glue is I give it all a good soaking, and then I give it another good soaking. But I do understand the worry. I think a double slip is something like £45 a pop, which is, you know, a substantial amount of money. But if you were to ruin it, I mean, to take a double slip out and replace it would take ages. But rest assured, you won't damage it. I can hear paint dripping on the fiddle yard below. So I've obviously left some big hole there somewhere. Hey, not the end of the world, is it? All right, I'm just about done, I think. Right, that'll do. And now all I'm going to do is, once this glue is sort of dissipated into it, I will pull out the bits of blue tack, and then as it dries, all I will do is just move these sets of points and keep them free. Just check every hour, come along, give them a wiggle, and that'll be the end of that. Beautiful. Right, let's get back to doing the green stuff. Now, while that point starts to dry out, it's time to remove all our protective film and all that stuff and have a look at the finished product. I think some of the PVA that I painted on initially obviously stuck to the masking tape. Oh, it's better. I must confess I'm rather pleased. Obviously we need to do some work down at the other end, but I think it blends in rather well. And then when you get to the other end of sort of platform 3 and you go into the stuff that I'd done before with those bright colours, tends to look a bit more like the Chelsea flower show than an overgrown embankment. What I have to do now is get the vacuum cleaner in and clean up the edge of this platform area. Now I've cleaned up the area around the embankment, but the vegetation itself is still quite damp where I've been spraying on with that scenic cement, so we'll let that lie overnight and then we'll add to the bland piece at the other end in a few days time, and just to bring it on and round that job off really. I must confess I am pleased with that, and whether I start to pull out some of these more garish kind of colours and make it more a bit more bland and a bit more kind of prototypical, there's a word, then we should look into that. Now I've also installed the ground signals that run into and from the maintenance siding where you see the inspection coach. So those signals are in and working, and I think we need to take one last look at that point, and as you can see the motion works quite freely, there's nothing wrong with it, it's just drying nicely. But I will come back later in the day and give it another poke, and I wouldn't surprise me if I came down in the morning and found it had seized up, but it'll free very easily. So, you know, ballasting points isn't really as scary as you might think it is. Now that scene still requires a great deal of effort. Obviously we've got weeds and grasses to put in on the actual tracks themselves running into platform 3 because it's a kind of neglected bay platform. There's the railway detritus, bits of rail, bits of pallet and all that sort of stuff to go in. That's even before we think about running an airbrush through to bring down the proper amount of weathering on the track and on the rails themselves. So still got lots and lots to do there. What do you think? Did you think it looked any better? Does it look a bit naff, bland or whatever? What I would appreciate is your views, and please leave them in the comment section down below, and perhaps you give us a thumbs up. More importantly, thank you very much if you voted in the Key Model World Hornby Magazine Awards, even if it wasn't for me. It's your vote that counts, so we can bring on the companies and show the companies which ones are doing better than others, and of course the rewards for YouTubers. Now I'll leave you with one of the award ceremonies from the show, and I'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Thanks a lot, take care. Bye-bye.
And in third place was that Model Railway guy. Sam's Trains. And the winner of the YouTube Channel of the Year for Model Railways is Chadwick Model Railway.